Welcome back to part 2 of Camille Guaty's interview. I hope that you learned so much from that first part. It was really a lot, wasn't it? Well, now you're going to learn even more, and I think you'll really be moved by all her stories and everything she has to share. So enjoy.
Like I was saying before, there were fears. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't like, oh, happy-go-lucky all the time. My fears were, oh, when this baby comes, people always say, oh, he looks like you, or oh, da-da-da.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, if anybody says he looks like my husband, that's going to be a trigger for me. And this is a great part that I want people to hear, because we can play, God, scientist, whatever you want to call it, when we're choosing our donor and say, oh, I want her to have brown hair. I want her to have dimples. I want her to have darker skin like me. I want her to come from this ethnic background. And the child will come out how the child comes out. And my child came out looking exactly like my husband. And there is a theory that babies come out looking like the dads because dads will flee. So it's a way for them to connect. I don't know if you've ever heard this.
I haven't.
But it's like some theory that most babies come out looking like the dads as a source of connection. But he still remains to look exactly like my husband. Really? He is like mini version of my husband. So my worst fear came true because everyone was saying, gosh, he is your twin. He looks exactly like you. I don't see any of Camille in there. I think it was like at 10 months when I had a final breakdown where I was just like, I want people to stop saying this. I don't understand. He's my son too. Why is this happening? But the best thing about it is when you have these fears, talk about it. Talk about it to somebody. Don't let them fester. Because coming out with how I felt allowed my husband to support me where I needed to be supported. And it's the reality.
Yeah.
Whether my genes were in there or not, he still could have looked exactly like my husband.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Or your husband's mother or your husband's grandmother.
Right. And then there was a moment that I had where my son kept on doing this funny, smile, and one time I was in the mirror with him and I smiled and then he did the thing and I was like, oh, he's doing that because of me. So there is this amazing moment that came back and we're like, okay, well, he doesn't have my genes, but he's like
connected.
He's mimicking my behavior. Yeah, he's connected. And also, what does it even matter if he has my nose? Like, how egotistical is it, right? Oh, I want him to act like me and look like me. No, they are their own little people. Yeah. And I want him to be him. I want him to be himself. And I want him to look whoever he's going to look like. It doesn't matter.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, there's all those lovely, tricky moments that you have to navigate. But in the end, I think it's a way for us as parents of going through donor conception to kind of grow. Yeah. And there's a lot of growing that happens.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. But, we get there and you don't get stuck in it.
That's amazing.
I don't think anybody chooses it if they're not ready. You got to be ready, but ready doesn't necessarily mean without fear.
That's a great point. I'm so glad. I hope everybody heard that. Yes, you could be ready with fear. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind if I quote you, because that is really beautiful. I think it's so important for people to know that.
You can be in acceptance of it, but still be afraid of it.
Yes, 100%.
And the only way to get rid of that fear is to go through it. You got to go through it and you got to grow with it. And I always say, Lisa, people like you, that, you need to find someone to speak to, find a therapist. We had one. And my husband also said something really great when this was happening. When I was we were both broken about me not being able to get pregnant through IVF. And I was so distraught. And he said, this isn't just happening to you, it's happening to us.
Oh.
I was like, you're right. And he's like, so allow me to help you because I was acting like this was just my problem and
I
my
love
fault.
that guy, Camille. That is beautiful.
I know. He's got his problems. All right.
But that's so beautiful.
It actually, going through this, really brought us closer, which sometimes can bring couples apart.
Yes.
But that's where I think like communication and speaking, like we saw a therapist together, not just me.
That's great.
And I think that was really helpful.
And what did the therapist help you with?
A lot of the grieving was the main thing, recognizing that as grief.
Mm-hmm.
I would have just bypassed that. I would have just taken it, oh, I feel sad. She had me write a letter and then letting it go.
Mm-hmm.
The great part about going through that grief is that's how I was able to shift my lens of looking at the donor as not as a threat, but as a woman who was now allowing me or giving me this gift. I know people don't like that word sometimes when I say gift in that way, but that's what I say because it was.
Yeah.
A gift that was going to fulfill a dream. She allowed me to be a mom in a way that I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I all of a sudden was grateful for her rather than looking at her as a threat in my life, which is so crazy to even think, but I wanted like no part of her.
Well, of course. And you need that transformation, right? We all go through that. I went through that when I adopted my children also. We all go through it. It's not the way that we thought the story was going to be. And it's nothing against that person. It's about our own healing and our own development and our own transformation to this different place. And now you got to this new place and you were able to accept her and embrace the whole process and embrace being able to be somebody who you didn't think you were going to be, which was a mom of a donor conceived child. And that's a huge transformation for anyone. It's enormous.
Yeah.
How did you decide, okay, I'm going to start talking about this? And then when did you decide I want to talk about this openly to the world?
Two things happened. One, my husband did not want to talk about it. He didn't want anyone to know. It was like a family secret. And he comes from a family that is very secretive. And I come from a family that's kind of an open book. You know, we don't leave anything unpacked. Mm-hmm. We get in there. And I remember when he was saying that, how it made me feel. I told him, I said, you know, when you say that, it makes me feel like I'm the problem. It makes me feel like something was wrong and there's shame in our story and you don't want to talk about it because you feel shame about it. I said, when what we really should be doing is celebrating our journey and how we got here and making this like a positive way of building a family. Because if we keep it a secret, then there's a problem. Right? Keeping something hidden to me was like, oh, there's shame in that story. Don't say it out loud. Or we can be really grateful and really proud of how we got here. And then that becomes our son's journey, our family building story. And he did see it that way. And he apologized. And I had these moments when I was pregnant. One in particular that I remember when I was at a Starbucks. And the woman who was working there, she knew me because I always went into the Starbucks, and she goes, oh my gosh, you're pregnant. How old are you? And I was like 42, I think 42, 43, can't remember. And she goes, oh, I have so much time. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm giving off. I'm giving off the appearance that I just got pregnant. And you can too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I just got pregnant. Yeah. With my husband and I, and you know, it just happened. And I said, yeah, you may. I said, you may have time. I said, but if you have time, I'll sit down and tell you how this happened, because it wasn't just a linear road. And that was always a little thing in the back of my head. And then the publicist called and said, People Magazine want to do a piece on you being pregnant, like a congratulations piece. And I was like, oh my gosh, if they do this and I just say I'm pregnant, then I'm going to be coming out publicly and not sharing my story. And that's when I told my husband, and I said, what do you think? I said, when it's out, it's out. Like, we are out.
Can't rewind that.
Can't rewind that tape. And I said, we can be private about it. It's not a secret if we don't go out publicly. We can keep our privacy and not say anything. But I'll tell you right now, I would feel like I was not celebrating my truth if I didn't say how I got pregnant. Like, I would feel like I was lying, on social media, posting these pregnant, like I would be lying. And that's just how I felt. I felt like this isn't the truth of how we got here. And people would be saying, congratulations. And I would be saying, oh, yes, thank God I got pregnant and all these things. But no, why not celebrate how I got pregnant? Why is this so taboo? Why does nobody want to talk about donor conception? Why did I feel ashamed in the beginning to use donor conception? Why was this such an issue for me? So I went through all that and I was like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to say how it happened and we're going to talk about it. And I'll tell you, when I was sitting down with the reporter talking about, she was in such shock. And she was like, you're not the only one. I was like, I bet you I'm not. She goes, you're the first one who's coming out. She goes, I bet this is going to lift the veil and all these celebrities are going to come out and start talking about how they got pregnant. But it didn't happen.
Crickets.
It didn't happen.
But Camille, that is amazing because here you are, right? You're a young actress. It's not like you're Meryl Streep who has, 40 years behind you and you're just can retire now.
Right.
You're still moving forward with your career and all these other people in Hollywood are not being honest about it. And so you had all this, I'm sure, all this pressure and all of this stuff on the line to say, I'm coming out with this story that nobody's ever done, and I'm going to share something that nobody's ever shared, and I'm going to be brave in the middle of my career when, I could do otherwise, just like everybody else. It's tremendous bravery. How did you do that?
Thank you. I don't know. I felt it in my gut that I wanted to celebrate how we got here rather than lie about it. And to me, it would have been lying just to say, I'm pregnant and here's my son. Like, there would have still been that thing in the back of my head.
Lying by omission, right?
Yeah. And you know what's interesting, what happened when I actually spoke out about it, it was very healing for me because then people were coming out of the woodwork being like, oh my gosh, I'm also thinking about it. And your story helped me. And this is how I'm feeling. And men were coming out saying, that they were feeling the same way and they're the ones who are having male infertility. And I was like, oh my gosh, this whole community that has been there underlying on social media that I never even knew existed. All of a sudden, people were coming out and it was helping me heal all the things that I was feeling as I was helping other people go through what they were going through because I had just gone through it. So I'm just so happy I made that choice because now even speaking to my son, you diminish the shame. And yeah, I might be one of the only ones who have spoken out about it, but there's a big community where people are talking about donor conception and we're here to do it right, or we have now the opportunity to change the trajectory of it without, making donor, identity now rather than making it anonymous. All of these things will be so helpful in the future for our children. Now you become like a little mom warrior now that it's out and you're able to do things in support of your child's future. And all of that I'm doing also helps because there's fears still come up, right?
Mm-hmm.
As time goes on. But I'm like, well, what is that fear? Oh, medical history. Well, what can I do to change that? What's another fear? Oh, siblings. Okay. How does that make me feel? Really weird. Do I have to call them siblings? Well, it is his genetic makeup. So let me get rid of my weirdness with it. And at some point, if he wants to meet, other siblings or whatever, what do they call?
Genetic siblings?
Genetic siblings. Yeah. If he wants to meet them, yes, that's his right. Mm-hmm. That's his right. And you know what? The more open I am about it, who knows? Who knows how he's going to feel? But I feel comfortable now with him, I found my donor. I found my donor on Instagram. Like, but I found her, and she's a beautiful woman, and she's a beautiful mother. And like, if my son wants to know where his genes came from, like, I would love for that to happen one day. So it just changes everything.
It's incredible, Camille. Just to back up for 1 second, because this is incredible, but I just wanted to address one other thing, and that is this issue, just to kind of go back about not looking like your child. I think a lot of people struggle with this. Am I going to connect with this child? Is this child going to connect with me? Is this child going to say, you're not my mom and I hate you because you don't, I don't have your dimples or I don't have your dark hair or whatever? People just worry that if there's no genetic connection, that all these other problems will come up. So certainly I have my issues with my children and they have their issues with me. It has nothing to do with genetics, but
Right.
I have a whole different story. So I'm wondering, from your perspective so far, did any of these fears come true for you? Do you feel any of them have kind of surfaced? And if so, how do you handle them?
No, none of them are true. We are very connected to each other. So much so that my husband we've had arguments, my husband, because he gets angry that he only, my son only wants me and doesn't want him. And I said to him, I said, I just wonder because I felt myself like constantly trying to like placate to my husband's needs, and I was like, I don't want to play middleman here. Like, if he's in a mommy phase, let him be in a mommy phase.
Yeah.
You'll get your daddy time.
Yes. Right.
Just take it as a break, because it's not easy for either of us when he only wants mommy and he doesn't want daddy.
Right.
But I was like, if it was you who had the genetic issue, right? I said, can you just give it to me? Like, let me have this.
Yes.
Let me have
right.
this time where he is like, mommy, 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 mommy.
That's so sweet.
He still had his issues with it. But like I say, is it a valid fear? Absolutely. It's part of, I think, going through this process. You will think these things, but you are the mom. You are the mom no matter what. And the connection with your child is really, whether it's your genes or not, is truly up to you, right? And how much you want to connect and how you want to connect. And, and I'm sure at this point, when everyone's like struggling to become pregnant and you make this choice, you are in it. You will be doing things that birthday parties and who knows what, but you'll be doing it all. Making baby food that you were like, didn't think you were going to do. And Lord knows, but yes, you will do everything for this baby, just the same as if you didn't have an issue getting pregnant. It would have been, it's the same. And he's my husband's, he's both of ours.
Yes.
Yes. And sometimes my husband will differ and say, hey, I think he loves you more. And I'm like,
okay.
He might love me more now.
That's right.
Great.
What happens later. Yes.
Put in your time, love, and maybe
he'll right. Exactly. That is a challenge.
He loves us both unconditionally as much as we love him unconditionally. And yes, there are those moments where he tells me to get away and I don't want you here, or, and that's fine. It's a little person now. He's 4, and you need to respect their autonomy and what they want. And they want their space, and I'm going to give him his space.
But it doesn't feel like that's happening because he's not genetically connected to you. You don't ever have that feeling. So
no, but I will say, when he's in a bad mood, I'm going to say, that's your genes.
Right. I'm not to blame.
I mean, it's just
right. Yes.
Just a little joke between my husband and I.
That's funny.
Because my husband is like perpetually always like with a sour face, and I'm always like smiling. So if our son is in a bad mood, I'm like,
yep, you're right. Yep. Don't blame me. That's so funny.
You've got strong genetics there.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you one last question, is that, I often say that it's really hard when you move forward in your life. You think about, I want to get pregnant. I want to have a baby. everyone in your life is supportive of you because these are the people who you choose to be in your circle. But then as your circle widens, you end up meeting other people. You end up meeting, the head of the soccer team and the PTA mom and the, ballet class teacher or whoever. And people don't always feel very warmly about this concept for religious or cultural reasons, or because people are old fashioned. Sometimes they don't embrace it. And so then you have to decide, like, am I going to tell the assistant teacher in my kid's school who seems to be very culturally different or religiously different and maybe is not going to be embracing this? Are they going to look at my child differently if I tell them? And how do I get to a place where I make that decision? So how are you starting? And I know he's just heading into this school age, and so it's just beginning for you, but how are you navigating that?
At first, I used to tell people like right off the bat, and it was kind of, I think, a little jarring for people. They don't really know how to take it, or, it was just awkward. And then I kind of got to a place where I was like, okay, again, it's not a secret. It's just like everybody doesn't need to know until it comes up, right? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't come up, then I don't need to say it. My son's in a very small school right now, 15 people, and there's a kid that looks exactly like him. And I said, wow. His mom's a little bit older. And I was like, is that her genetic son, or do you know if they use a donor? They're like, that's an odd question. I was like, oh, well, I'm only saying because my son comes from a donor and he looks exactly like my son. So that would be interesting if like we use the same donor. Yeah. So they're like, oh, so it comes out in different ways sometimes. This school, I haven't necessarily said it, but we're doing a family photo thing soon, and I'm going to talk to them about it. And I think, like, be careful with, like, if there's people that you think are not going to be, this is just my opinion, by the way, but if you think that people aren't going to be, you can protect your family, right? And your family story. If you think that people aren't going to be so nice.
Yes.
I didn't see a lot of that until actually coming to Nashville, where I feel like it's a very religious city. Tennessee is just a religious state. And I was like, oh, I think I need to protect this a little bit. I mean, anybody can look online and see my, my whole journey and story, but I don't know how welcoming people would be if I just like blurted it out. So I'm a little bit more picky with who I talk to about it, but friends that we've met know my story, and everyone is great. People are fun. They don't even blink an eye. And I think as we're coming into this day and age now where it's like same-sex marriages, same-sex couples, they have donor, kids and children, and we don't blink an eye with that. So why would we, when we're having trouble getting pregnant, why do we think people are going to think negatively? Is it because we think negatively of it? Do you know what I mean? Is it because of how we thought about it in the beginning that we think other people are going to think this way? I also sometimes have the viewpoint of, I actually don't care what they think, because this is how I raised my family. And if I don't have a problem with it, then maybe it'll change their perspective when they see how cool we are. Great we are.
Right.
So it's only sometimes, I think, when we're hoarding a story, hiding it from people and not wanting them to know, that I feel like people are like, oh, maybe there was maybe that's a problem. But I want them to see that we are a healthy family, and our family will still be growing.
Yeah.
Eventually. And that's cool.
Yeah, it's great. But we see privacy and secrecy can be two different things, right? You don't have to be ashamed, but there are people who have these religious or cultural differences who, have difficulty. I talk in my book about, my daughter going to kindergarten, and the assistant teacher was an immigrant from India who has her own ideas about life and about children, and she has very strong religious beliefs. And she would always say to me, anytime there's a parent-teacher conference, well, you don't really know your child because, she's not yours. And so, of course, you don't really know her. And this is just how she always felt, right? And so that's her belief system. And so I felt like, you know what? I don't need to tell the world. Also, it gets tiring, right? To every single person on the planet wants to know every detail of, how you chose your donor and all of that. It does at year 2, maybe, feel fine, but at year 10, it does get a little tiring. So it is hard to make those decisions, but it sounds like you're very open about it, Camille, and I give you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you. I mean, I'm open to a point. Like I said, I'm not how I used to be. I think I used to say it as a part of a healing thing for me. And I don't find it necessary to say anything as often as I used to. In fact, most of the people in his new school have no idea. And that's okay. That's fine. And I do speak to Morrison about it. He knows. So if anybody, if anyone were to ask him, or if he still would say, I'm mommy and I'm my daddy's daddy. So the donor part probably wouldn't even come into his head until, who knows, a little later on when he's saying, because we talk about exactly how he got here, and he knows the whole entire story. So
does he like to hear his donor story?
Oh, he does. And when we were at that conference the other day, and we got and you were there. We got a little a sperm toy, and I said, "Well, that's actually." And he goes, "It's a sperm whale. It doesn't really look like a whale." I'm like, "It doesn't. What does it look like?" He goes, "A tadpole." I was like, "Yeah, it does look like a tadpole, doesn't it?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's a sperm from daddy that goes into an egg." I said, "And what happened to mommy's eggs?" He goes, "Mommy's eggs didn't work." I said, "No, they didn't." I said, "So where did we get an egg?" Because we went to the egg lady. And I was like, "Yes, we went to the egg lady." And the egg lady put the egg in the sperm and mommy carried it.
Nice.
He's a big storyteller. So part of telling the story to him is he loves it.
That's great.
And, and there's other tools, like you have your book that you have out that is great to, map out how they got here and put pictures and all of these things. The scrapbook is amazing. And
thank you.
All of that, I encourage people to do as much as you can in being able to tell your story to your kids, because it's so important.
So important. So important. And on that note, I think I will let you go, Camille. I know you have to get back to your family, but thank you so much. Is there anything before we end that you wanted to share with the audience, or you think that we haven't discussed?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure we covered a lot there. I think we covered a lot. But if anybody, like I said before, if anybody wants to reach out to me on social media, I'm here. I am not a therapist. I will only give you my story, and I won't really give advice, because medical advice or any of that kind of advice is not my game. But I'm here if anyone needs an ear.
It's incredible and so kind of you and so generous. And you have a very big and busy life. And I really, really appreciate you spending time with us today and sharing this information with people. It's going to help so many people, Camille, and you already have. And I'm so grateful to you that you're doing this. It's really incredible. And thank you for coming on, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And for all of you out there, please reach out to me or Camille anytime on social media or on my website, familybuilding.net. And certainly subscribe, because that's how we keep going. And please join us again next week for another episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
I am a 4-time egg donor. I started medications for my 4th donation last night. So we're still in the early stages, but we're working on it. I was a fertility nurse for about 2 years at a fertility clinic in Los Angeles. And what really drove me to being a donor was